Good morning. How you all doing? Good. Having a good view up here today. See Miss Essie there, Lois, Roy. It's good to see you here today, all of you. You feel okay, Roy? He can't hear me, can he? Just wave at me. There we go. Well, it's good to have you all with us. We have a lot of folks who don't feel well. That's heartbreaking. Very heartbreaking. Carl, due to a lack of blood flow, his kidneys have taken a lick, and they're probably going to have to postpone his surgery until he starts functioning better on the inside. So we want to continue praying for Carl. He's got a rough road ahead of him. We're going to continue our study on the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 7 and verse 12. We read out of Luke's book, but I wanted to cover some more information that's contained in Luke's record than Matthew's. That's the reason I chose that one to read from. But our study is going to be based on verse 12 in the Sermon on the Mount. Therefore, I know all Bible students know, therefore means a conclusion, drawing a conclusion. Whatever you want men to do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. This was named, I guess you'd say, the Golden Rule back in the 16th century. The saying of Jesus has become universally accepted, and it was given that designation as a golden rule as opposed to any other kind of a rule. However, philosophers have since designated two other rules that human beings live by, and all of us live by at least one of these rules as our primary way of living. We probably live by all three at one point or another, but there's a dominant rule, and for most all people, the most dominant rule, I hope anyway, is the silver rule that people have chosen to live by, which is not as harmful, I guess, as you'd say the iron rule is. But the golden rule is probably the least practiced rule of all. It's contrary to human nature. It's not something we want to do. We're selfish. By nature, we're selfish. And the golden rule demands that we not be selfish. That means we have to fight ourselves because, well, we're selfish. So practicing golden rule is something we have to work at, which is one of the reasons why I think most people choose not to follow the golden rule, is because it is something a person has to be determined to do before they'll ever be able to do it. Let's take a look at the three rules. The iron rules first. I think most all of us are familiar with it. It's the idea that might makes right. It's power, whoever has the power. In Habakkuk chapter 1, verses 6 and 7, 9 and 10, Israel has to be punished. Israel, this is the children of God, and they've misbehaved. And as a good parent, the Lord has to punish them for their misbehavior. And this is how God punishes an entire nation of people. You know, we deal with one child or two children at a time. The Lord, he deals with the entire nation on occasion, sometimes more than that. But here's how he went about it. He said, I am raising up the Chaldeans, or the Babylonians, as we're more familiar with that name. I am raising up the Chaldeans. They're a bitter, a hasty nation. They're tough. They're bad to the bone. They are terrible and dreadful. Well, we see them today over in the Middle East. Them people are war. They're a walking war. Terrorists, they don't mind dying for their cause. Suicide bombers and all this stuff. These are the people that the Lord's talking about. I'm raising up these people. They are terrible. They are dreadful. They all come for violence. That's their middle name, violence. They're war. They're war in sandals. Their faces are set like the east wind. They gather captives like sand. They scoff at kings, and princes are scorned by them. They're nothing. Kings mean nothing to these people. They deride every stronghold, for they heap up earthen mounds, and they just take it. They seize it. Whatever they want, they grab. It's theirs for the taking, because they got the power. Cain lived by the iron rule. We read about Cain in 1 John 3 and 12, that his brother Abel, he was a good man. Cain, not so much. So in order to set the record straight, Cain decided to kill his brother. Why? Because he could. He didn't like him being good and him being bad, and he took him out of the picture. So there would only be Cain left. Might makes right. Alexander the Great, he followed the golden rule. He conquered most of the earth in 12 years. 12 years. Can you imagine that? Back at that time, running around in chariots, running around on foot. 12 years this man nearly captured the world. In Abbott's History of Alexander the Great, he wrote, an example of his disposition, the fact that he lived by the iron rule, may be seen in his capture of the city of Gaza. We see that on the news every day now, don't we? He captured the city of Gaza in southwestern Palestine. He took the governor, Batiste. He bored holes through his heels, and by chariot, he dragged him around the city until he was dead. He took this city, and in order to make sure everybody knew it, he could take whatever he wanted. He did this to their king, or the governor. Julius Caesar, in his defeat of Pharnacius II in Pontus, Veni, vidi, vici. This was the rule he lived by. I came, I saw, I conquered. Whatever he wanted, he took, because he had the wherewithal to take it. Might makes right. Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin has done a lot of harm to the world, a lot of harm to our nation in particular. The Origin of Species in 1859, and then The Descent of Man later in 1871, became books that were studied in schools throughout our country. They were taught as truth, as actual science, which of course they're not, but students listened to their professors, and they, for the most part, accepted what they had been taught. One excerpt from Darwin's Descent of Man is this. There is reason to believe that vaccination has preserved thousands who, from a weak constitution, would formerly have succumbed to smallpox. But somebody came up with a vaccination and they could heal or prevent smallpox. Thus, the weak members of civilized societies propagate their own kind. The reason these folks got smallpox is because they have a weaker constitution. So all you're doing is you're propagating these weak people, letting them live longer. No one who has attended to the breeding of domestic animals will doubt that this must be highly injurious to the race of man. According to Darwin and his theory of evolution, the best thing to do with the sick and infirmed is to kill them. Why would you want to allow them to continue to breed and multiply? You wouldn't allow animals to do that. If you had a sick cow, you put the cow down. If you got a horse with a broken leg, you put the horse down. Why wouldn't you do this with people too? When you help people, assist people in their infirmities, all you're doing is creating problems for the human race. According to his theory of evolution, the best thing to do was get rid of them. Might makes right. We can do it because we can. Adolf Hitler, we all know about this guy. Socialist fascist. According to historians, he's responsible for 51 million deaths. You imagine that? 51 million deaths rest on his shoulders. Now, they're not all attributed to him. It's because he was the one that caused a little stir over there in Europe. But all the deaths that resulted as a result of his stirring up, historians attribute to him himself. He was an evil man. He believed that might makes right. If he wanted Poland, he just took it. And he got away with it. Nobody said a word. America, home of the free, land of the brave. America lives by the rule of might makes right, the iron rule. Roe versus Wade, the United States Supreme Court. This is what made me think about the justices. I was talking about that in Bible class. I was thinking about the Supreme Court justices last week. They're all dead now. Abortion's still with us. And I wonder what the Lord said when they came face to face with him. I don't know. I don't know if it's pretty, but it was might makes right. You got the power to do it, do it. The idea was that a mother can kill her unborn baby just because she is stronger and wants to. That's living by the iron rule. I seen a woman on TV one time. She had an abortion because it was going to interfere with wearing her bikini. She was going to be pregnant and make her bikini not look good. So she aborted her baby, killed her baby. Sad, huh? I don't know. We call Hitler a monster. I don't think Hitler was the only monster that ever walked this earth. Do you? In the church, the iron rule is practiced by Diotrephes. He seized power of Christ's church just because he could. He was the man. We read about him in 3 John verses 9 and 10. Secondly, there's the silver rule that I mentioned a moment ago. The silver rule is referred to sometimes as the golden rule without the gold. Basically, it states what you do not wish done to you, do not do to others. It sounds a lot like the golden rule, but it's not. There's a difference. It's a good rule. It's just not the best rule to live by. Two Greek philosophers taught the silver rule. They condemned slavery on the ground that one should not do to others what generates anger in himself. If this makes you angry, don't do it to other people. If somebody wets their finger and sticks it in your ear, and that makes you mad, well, don't wet your finger and stick it in somebody else's ear. It's not the right thing to do. The Jewish Rabbi Hillel said, what is hateful to yourself, do to no other. Now, this is the most celebrated philosopher among the Jews in the 1st century A.D., and he lived by the silver rule as well. In the apocryphal book of Tobit, there's a passage in which Tobias says to his son, what you yourself hate, do to no man. To Tobit 4, verse 16. Confucius say, what you do not wish yourself, do not unto others. The philosophers believed in the silver rule, and they taught it throughout the years. The silver rule is a negative rule. It's what you're not supposed to do. That's what it majors on. Do not do what you do not want done. It's a negative rule. The golden rule, on the other hand, is the opposite of a negative rule. The golden rule is a positive rule. The negative rule is do not do what you do not want done. The positive rule, the golden rule, is do to others as you want done to yourself. Christianity is a positive religion. Sometimes people see it as a negative religion, but it's not. It's a positive religion. you're not supposed to do this. You're not supposed to do that. The Lord doesn't want me to have fun. I can't do this. I can't do that. God's all the time saying no. That's not what the Christian religion is all about. It's not what God says, don't do this. It's when God says, but do this. Okay? It's a positive religion. And because it is positive, there is negative to it. But it's always positive in its teaching. And that's important to understand. Take Colossians 3:17, for example. Whatever you do in word, every word you speak, in deed, every deed you do, whatever you do, what you say, what you do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Do it all because Jesus authorized you to do it. He said you could do it. Stop in the name of the law. What does that mean? Stop running. By the authority of the law, I can make you stop running. Well, that's what this statement means here. Do all in the name, because Jesus said do it. The Christian religion is a positive religion. Sometimes people say, well, how come you people don't use a mechanical instrument in your worship? And someone says, well, it's because the Lord said don't use mechanical music. That's not what happened. Why we don't use a piano in this building, why we don't have a guitar, Jesus didn't tell us to. He never gave us an order to use a piano or a guitar or any mechanical music for that matter. A preacher asked me one time, do you have to be told everything you do? And he kind of caught me off guard. I had to think about it a minute, and I said, well, yeah, I do. That's what Paul's saying. Whatever you do, John, whatever you say, whatever you do, everything you do it because Jesus told you to do it. And if he didn't tell you to do it, don't do it. It's a positive religion. We do what we do because it's what God would have us to do. That's what makes it gold. It's not based on the negative. It's based on the positive, very opposite of the silver rule. Carson wrote, the positive form is certainly more telling than its negative counterpart, for it speaks against sins of omission as well as sins of commission. The sin of commission is the silver rule. Don't do this because you don't want it done to yourself. Don't stick your finger in somebody else's ear because you don't want them sticking their finger in your ear. That's the sin of commission, an act you commit. But the rule Jesus taught is a sin of omission, failure to do good. James said, whoever knows to do good and does not do that, to him it is sin. When I'm obligated to do a thing based on my understanding of the will of God, this is what the Lord would have me to do. I believe this with all my heart. He didn't say that in the Bible. It doesn't matter. Based on everything I know about God, this is what God would have me to do, but I'm not going to do it because I don't want to do it. It's going to cost me some money. I used to cheat on my income taxes. Probably shouldn't say that on the internet, should I? When I was young, I cheated on my income taxes because I thought the government got enough of my money, so I cheated and kept all I could. And then I became a Christian, and I didn't know much, but I did learn that it's not right to cheat on your income taxes. I cheated on them again. I didn't want to give up the money. Whoever knows to do good, or what good is, and he doesn't do it, to that person it's a sin. I sinned worse after I become a Christian than I did before I become a Christian. Before I become a Christian, I thought it was all right to cheat on your income taxes. Everybody doing it. But after I become a Christian, I heard some preacher say you're not supposed to do that. I believed I probably shouldn't do that, and I went and did it anyway. My sin after conversion was worse than my sin before conversion. Why? Because Christian religion is a positive religion. It's the choices we make. The choice to do right, the choice to do good, the choice to tell the truth, the choice to not lie. We do good unto others because we want good done to us as well. Carson went on to say the goats in Matthew 25, there was a judgment scene. And at the judgment, there were two groups of people. One group of people, they seen folks who needed help, and they didn't want to help them for whatever reason, and they didn't help them. And then there was another group of people in the judgment that they saw people that needed help, and they had the means to do it, and they helped them. They shared with them whatever they had that they could. And in the judgment, the ones that did good to the down and out, Jesus called them sheep. And the ones that chose not to do good, he called them goats. That's what Carson's talking about. The goats in Matthew 25 would be acquitted under the negative form of the rule, the silver rule. Why? They didn't do anybody any harm. They saw people who were in need of something. They didn't hurt them, or they didn't kick them, or they didn't yell at them. They just ignored them and went on with their life. They lived by the silver rule. Don't do to others what you don't want them to do to you. And they didn't. So according to the silver rule, in the judgment, they should have went to heaven. But they didn't go to heaven. It was just the opposite. The condemned injured no one. There was no sin of commission. They were condemned for not doing good, which was a sin of omission. According to the silver rule, they go to heaven. According to the golden rule, they go to hell. It's a big difference between the two rules. They're not the same. They sound a lot alike, but they're not the same. They're very different. Under the form attributed to Jesus, he didn't care for those folks much. Elements of the golden rule, I'm only going to list three. One, it's grounded in divine revelation. Matthew 7:12, whatever you want men to do to you, do also to them. Why? For this is the law and the prophets. Why should I do to men what I want done to myself? Jesus said, because this is what the law and the prophets taught. This is what the law and the prophets were all about. They were trying to bring you to the point where you would do good to others. And this is kind of a summary of that particular moral characteristic. Carson wrote, with regard to this, the rule is not arbitrary, without rational support, as in radical humanism. In Jesus' mind, its rationale, the word for, lies in its connection with revealed truth that's recorded in the law and the prophets. Basically what I just said. This is more or less a summary of the law and the prophets with regard to this particular moral attribute. In Matthew 22, verses 36 to 40, this is one we're more familiar with probably. Jesus was asked, which is the great commandment in the law? And he gave two, actually. The first one is to love the Lord your God. The second one is to love your neighbor as yourself. And that's how he answered the question. Love God, love your neighbor as yourself. And then he said, on those two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. That command was a summary of what the law and the prophets was all about. That's what the law and the prophets are trying to teach people. And there's a few summaries throughout Jesus' teaching that we receive, which means that the golden rule is very, very important, because a lot of time and space was occupied in the law and the prophets in order to get that point across. Number two, the golden rule is universal, applies to all people. Therefore, whatever The whatever applies to every segment of life. As a father, whatever you do, whatever you want your children to do with you, do also to them. As a husband, as a Christian, as an employee, as a citizen of a government. That's why it's wrong to cheat on taxes. I don't want people to cheat me. I shouldn't have cheated the government. I was guilty. This is what the positive law does. It emphasizes goodness in us. Silver rule emphasizes the I don't want to get involved in us. Number 3, the golden rule requires action. Action. Therefore, whatever you want men to do to you, do also to them. You can see all these people who are down and out. You can walk by them every day. You don't harm them. You don't kick them. You certainly don't spit on them. But the question is, do you ever do them any good? That's the gold in the golden rule. I don't want to. It costs too much. It's expensive to help people. I don't want to help everybody that needs help. I'll go broke. Well, you can't help everybody. Do I help what I can? Well, I give at church. Yeah, I know. Talking about when you're walking down the sidewalk, when you go into Walmart. I'm not talking about those crooks that stand out there and try and get your money away from you because they don't want to get a job. I'm talking about honest to goodness people who are in need of our help. Do you help them? If I was down and out, I would hope somebody would help me, wouldn't you? Well, if that's the case, and it is, then I ought to be willing to help somebody else. That's the gold in the golden rule. It hits us right in the gut. Because we're selfish by nature. We're selfish. That's what being in the flesh is all about. We're selfish. And the Spirit has to overcome the selfishness of the flesh. And it's not easy. It's not easy at all. It takes time, and we get better and better as time goes on, but we got to be putting it into action. We've got to be doing the do part of this command. The golden rule has its critics real quickly. Dan Barker, a lot of people here has at least heard of Dan Barker. He was a former Pentecostal preacher who turned atheist, and the day after that, I think he lost his mind because he's never written anything that makes sense. But in his book, Losing Faith in Faith from Preacher to Atheist, he says, if one were a masochist, the golden rule would justify his beating up on someone else. A masochist is the person who likes to receive punishment, suffering from other people. Okay? I would pay Jerry over here, I'll give you $10 and punch me in the nose. A masochist, it usually has to do with sex, though. But it can be this way also. It fits in the definition. A masochist wants to suffer pain at the hands of another person. Okay, that's what a masochist. Now, if I'm that kind of person, if I want to experience pain at the hands of Jerry, then according to Barker, I have the right to inflict pain on another person. Well, maybe, assuming that a masochist is a normal person. Normal people aren't masochists. People that are tilted too far in one direction. Those are the masochists. That's not the standard that we go by. And to use an argument like that demonstrates how desperate Barker is. And I ain't going to go nowhere. Joseph Fletcher is a situation ethicist. You got to wait for the situation to determine what right and wrong is. But he said the golden rule can be approved upon. He said, do unto others as they would have you do unto them. Well, to Fletcher, that seems right, but it's wrong. Do unto others as they would have you do unto them. The word they, that's a little complicated. A guy's laying out here in the street, and he's high as a kite, because he shot stuff in his arm. And I walked past him, and he says, "Hey, man, I need another fix. Give me $50. Now, according to Fletcher, I need to give him the $50. Do unto him, John, as he wants you to do unto him. No, that don't fly. I'm not giving him money. If he wants to go somewhere and straighten up, I wouldn't mind helping that, but I'm not going to feed an addiction. So his criticism, though it's very popular in universities, is wrong. And so are the professors who teach this stuff. You've heard a lot about situation ethics in school, I know. You heard a lot about Joseph Fletcher, I know. This is the kind of logic they employ, which is not logic at all. There's some enemies of Christianity who are much more honest than these other people. They approve of the golden rule. They believe it can't be improved upon. One is John Stuart Mill. He wrote, "To do as one would be done by, and to love one's neighbor as oneself constitute the ideal perfection of utilitarian morality." Now, Stuart didn't believe in God, but he admitted this was the epitome of goodness, this teaching of Jesus. You can't improve upon it. To do unto others as you would like to have done to, you just can't get no better than that. Thomas Paine wrote, he didn't believe in God either. Well, let me take that back. He was an agnostic. Maybe there's God, maybe not. And that's about as far as his thinking went. Anyway, with regards to the golden rule, he said the duty of man is plain and simple, and it only has 2 points. Number one, his duty to God, which every man must feel. Everybody has a tug. It's a tug from heaven. They may not know where it's coming from, but it's a tug from heaven as what one ought to do. I think that's what's behind the creation of the word ought. It's a moral obligation. We all feel like we ought to do something. The ought began with God. And with respect to his neighbor, number two, to do as he would be done by. According to Thomas Paine, it's the highest rule a man could hope to attain to. Any philosopher worth his salt attests to the brilliance of Jesus Christ. Without a doubt, he was the most brilliant man that ever walked. And anybody that's honest, whether they believe in God or not, they all agree with it. Therefore, whatever you want men to do to you, do also to them, for this is what the law and the prophets was trying to get you to do all the time. Well, that's where we are today as far as the golden rule is concerned. This is my responsibility, and now it's your responsibility too. However you want to be treated by other people, that's the way you need to treat them. Not because you have to, but because it's the right thing to do. It's the Jesus thing to do. Do good. Can you imagine what the world would be like if every person lived by this rule? It'd be a nice place to be, I think. If you're not a Christian, Jesus gave his wonderful teachings that we would know how we are supposed to live while we are here on this planet. We're only going to be here for a time. We're not supposed to stay here forever. Our days are numbered. One day we shall die, we shall leave here. At that time, we're either going to live with God or not. It seems easy to understand that much. The real question is, what do I want to do with my life? Do I want to walk with God, my Creator, Or do I want to go for the gusto while I'm here? Whatever decision I make, there is a day of accountability. And the wrong choice will not be a pleasant result. If you've never obeyed Jesus, I would implore you to take a good, hard look at him and see what he's made of. Learn to believe him, repent, try to stop sinning, and be immersed in water for the forgiveness of sins as Christians. And this is who this is really aimed at, isn't it? He's talking to us. I want you to do to others like you want done to you. If you want love and care, assistance, help, then make sure you give it to other people. Because our heart tells on us. God knows our heart.